Oh, holy yeah. Nikes. Hey, it's Craig. You got a guy cut in half, literally cut in half, and he's got a bunch of like clothing and newspaper on top of him where they tried to burn him up, but the fire smoldered out. This is probably the most blood I've ever seen.
What began as a routine welfare check quickly escalated into a horrifying murder investigation when officers discovered a 76-year-old man's body cut in half, riddled with stab wounds, and a broken knife tip embedded in his spine.
At that time, I'd been a detective over 25 years, close to 30 years, and I'd had a couple really bloody crime scenes, but this was bad. It seemed to me that there was a lot of anger. It wasn't a quick kill, so to speak. It was a prolonged battle.
The gruesome nature of the murder launched an urgent investigation, and to the detectives' astonishment, what initially seemed like a targeted act soon pointed to a tangled network of multiple potential suspects.
You know a lot of things about this case. I got a lot of evidence on this case, and it's better to be a witness than a co-conspirator.
And what's a lawyer?
Okay.
The detectives were left stunned when the seemingly gentle 60-year-old grandmother shattered the silence with a chilling revelation, a truth more disturbing than they had imagined.
I didn't get hurt. I said, where did blood come from? It came to the upper.
Hi there and welcome. You're watching a brand new and exciting video from Red and Blue YouTube channel. On the night of June 10, 2018, at approximately 9:43 p.m. in Ann Arbor, Michigan, police received a 911 call from an elderly woman, deeply concerned about the well-being of her friend Robert Sharp.
Hello, where's your emergency? I'm at my friend's house. I checked in on him earlier today, did not find him around, and then the evening when I called his home phone, it said the voicemail wasn't set up, but it has been set up. But now there's no voicemail set up. Do you want to come into the house and check on it and like check the the person? Okay, what's his name?
His name is Robert.
How old is he?
76. So I live in the house, and as I'm driving past, I noticed that the paper was still on the front porch, and the door is a little bit open, so I'm not going in the house.
Officers rushed to the 200 block of Alpine Drive in Ann Arbor, unaware of the horrors that awaited them behind closed doors. Upon arrival, they found the front door unlocked and the house cloaked in complete darkness, an eerie silence hanging in the air.
Oh, Robert! Robert!
There was a fire in here. There was a fire downstairs. Baker, can you send the FD? There's some type of fire in the basement here. That's awesome. I can't breathe up here. What? Where could that be from?
Cautiously stepping inside, their flashlights slicing through the thick darkness, the officers found no trace of Robert Sharp. What they did notice, however, was the overwhelming stench of smoke hanging in the air. Fearing a potential fire and the risk of a gas explosion, they halted their search and called in the fire department. When firefighters arrived and pushed deeper into the house, they stumbled upon something far more disturbing than anyone could have anticipated.
And then the basement window's right in front of you there, right there. Alright. There's a hand. I can see a hand, fellas.
Let me take a look.
Peering through a shattered window, one of the firefighters spotted a lifeless hand lying on the floor, but that was only the beginning. What they discovered next would shock even the most seasoned investigator.
Oh, holy yeah. Nikes. Hey, it's Craig. You got a guy cut in half, literally cut in half, and he's got a bunch of like clothing and newspaper on top of him where they tried to burn him up, but the fire smoldered out. This is probably the most blood I've ever seen.
By then, the source of the smoke had become clear. Buried beneath a pile of scorched debris in the basement lay the partially burned body of Robert Sharp. But the horror didn't end there. As the search continued and investigators made their way into the kitchen, They were confronted with a scene so bloody and terrifying, it would be etched into their memories forever.
I know everything's pretty dry.
Yeah. So that big mirror, that was on top of him?
A bunch of paper on them. A bunch of papers, yeah. I don't want to for a while.
The kitchen bore the brunt of the bloodshed, with the highest concentration of blood pooled across the floor and drag marks leading from the kitchen down to the basement. A grim trail that suggested Robert had been murdered hours earlier. As investigators expanded their search to the parking area, they uncovered a crucial clue that would soon become central to the case.
A bunch of trash cans are all out. You walk down the parking area and look at all those trash cans, recyclables, make sure there's not like bloody rags or towels or out there. You know, I could see somebody leaving and dumping one of those trash cans on the way out of here with the car.
The discovery of a handwritten note raised immediate suspicion. It claimed someone had borrowed Robert's wheelbarrow and would be stopping by later that night. To investigators, it hinted at a possible confrontation, perhaps with a neighbor or someone harboring a grudge. But before turning their attention to those living nearby, officers needed to speak with the woman who made the 911 call, hoping to understand what led her to suspect something was terribly wrong.
So I came by earlier and his car wasn't here and I hadn't heard from him, so I thought, well, I'll give a call to the house. And I called to the house and it says the voicemail's not set up. I said, well, let me drive by, and so I came by tonight, and when I left, I started down the road and I said, well, what's that on the porch? Well, I come back around and it was his New York Times and a priority mail package. Well, his New York Times is like this coffee. And the door is cracked. I mean, the door is open about that way.
She recounted everything in detail, what had raised her concerns, and ultimately prompted the 911 call. But despite her cooperation, detectives couldn't yet rule her out as a potential suspect. To observe her reaction, they carefully revealed the gruesome details of Robert's death, watching closely for any signs of shock, guilt, or evasion.
There's somebody in there, we don't know if it's him. So just, when was the last time you talked to him?
I talked to him Thursday.
Okay.
She seemed truly heartbroken, visibly shaken by the news of Robert's brutal death. Her reaction appeared genuine, and she agreed to fully cooperate with the investigation, sharing helpful details about Robert's daily life, habits, and the people he interacted with, information that could be important in solving the case.
He doesn't have any family here. He doesn't have a whole lot of friends. He's a retired professor, you know, and so I just would come and, you know, he was trying to get the house organized and cleaned up because his wife just passed away.
How long ago did she pass away?
She passed away on April 20th, I believe. So Bob and Maria was his wife, and I've known them for 25 years.
Okay.
So he would go to Wendy's around noonish every day. And he would take his laptop and, you know, he'd always put it in the trunk, and he had his bag, and he took extra stuff. They, you know, a couple people knew him really well at Wendy's, and they would get his order.
The officers learned that Robert and his wife Maria had a daily routine of visiting a nearby Wendy's outlet. But after Maria passed away in April 2018, Robert continued going there alone. At the time, detectives had no idea just how important this connection to Wendy's would become in the next phase of their investigation. For now, their focus was on solving the mystery behind the suspicious note. They questioned several of Robert's neighbors, but none could provide any clues about who might have written it. During their inquiries, they also found out that Robert's only son David lived in New York with his wife and children. What struck the officers as unusual was that it was a friend, not David, who had called to report concern for Robert's safety. Wanting to know more, they reached out to David. When informed of his father's death, David was heartbroken, especially after losing his mother just months earlier. Still, he and his wife Christine were cooperative and gave investigators valuable information about Robert's personal life and daily habits.
My father learned at home how important education was and actually skipped a few grades and went to MIT at 15.
He never stopped learning. Like, his thing was to always learn.
My mom and dad met because they were set up by my dad's crazy aunt, Aunt Helen. My dad would read to my mom almost every night. They would just go up to their room and he would read to her. There was a Wendy's near my parents' condo that they loved to go to all the time. So after my mom died, my dad continued to go there for a while because it was just a part of their routine. It was a link to my mom.
Most notably, like Robert's friend, his son David also shared that Robert often had lunch at the local Wendy's. He said his father never mentioned any issues there, nor did he talk about anyone bothering him. In fact, David couldn't think of anyone who might have wanted to harm his father. Despite the lack of clear leads, detectives began to see the Wendy's connection as increasingly important. They visited the outlet, hoping to find something, anything that could push the investigation forward, but the visit yielded little. The staff warmly remembered Robert as a kind and gentle man, but had nothing else to offer. Still, the case was far from cold. Unknown to everyone, Robert had left behind one final crucial clue, a piece of evidence that would soon point detectives straight to his killer.
We found that on June 6th, just 5 days before he was murdered, Robert had actually called 911 to report that his home had been broken into. We couldn't help wondering, is this related to his homicide? Did the person who broke into Robert's house have something to do with his murder?
They immediately turned their attention to a 911 call Robert himself had made just a week before his death, a call that at the time hadn't seemed urgent. But now, with everything that had happened, it took on a whole new meaning. Listening closely, detectives realized the call contained a crucial detail, one that had gone unnoticed before but now pointed them straight toward a possible motive.
Hello, I'd like to report a crime, a break-in.
Okay. Is it happening now or did it?
No, it happened this afternoon.
Okay, just found it?
Yes, I just got home. I left this afternoon about 1:30, and then by the time I got home, I noticed that one of my drawers in which I keep keys and things had been rummaged through.
Did you find any obvious points of entry?
Yes, my back door.
How did it get in?
Well, I thought that my back door was locked, but when I got there and tried it, it was not locked.
If you don't know for sure that nobody's still inside, I'm going to ask you to wait outside.
Okay, I'll do that, yes.
They learned that on June 6th, just days before the murder, Robert had placed an emergency call. Responding officers had visited his home and, as standard procedure, recorded the entire interaction on their body cameras. Detectives quickly reviewed the footage, hoping it might reveal something useful. Given the state of the crime scene, they began to suspect that robbery could have been the motive, and they were now looking for anything that might support that theory.
And when you came up, you noticed the door was not locked. You went inside, and then what did you notice? You can go ahead and show me.
It was open, and so then, right inside that cupboard, I have a drawer where I normally put my car keys, I put my bill phones and that kind of thing in. I went inside the drawer where I do that, and it had obviously been rummaged through. Everything was in a different position and moved around.
Can you show me where that drawer is at?
Yeah. This is where my car keys would hang.
Okay.
And they're gone.
Okay.
I had one of those little blue sticks. And that I don't see.
And what is that?
Oh, it's to control your internet with a remote like this that operates a raccoon unit. And basically, the raccoon is on it. The raccoon is on it.
I don't know what a raccoon unit is.
Okay, a raccoon unit is something where you get all of your television from the internet. You don't have to buy cable. They stole the raccoon unit.
Oh.
In the footage, Robert could be seen explaining to the officers that his home had been ransacked. He appeared visibly shaken as he pointed out signs of forced entry, and mentioned that several items were missing. At the time, it was treated as a routine burglary. But now, in the context of his murder, detectives believe this earlier break-in might have been more than just a random crime. It could have been the first step in a deadly plan.
And those are regular here. This is
DVD
the DVD thing, and this is the DVD player. They're here. Now, another thing that was strange is in here, I shouldn't be using numbers that I got. I did. Credit cards, all kinds of things in there. None of it's missing as far as I can tell. It's all still there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's strange.
But there was something off about the robbery that didn't quite add up.
He seemed surprised about some of the things that were still present. His car keys are stolen. but his car is still there. There's credit card information on the open table, and that's still there.
Unfortunately, officers were unable to identify any suspects in the earlier home invasion at Robert's house. But just as the case seemed to stall, detectives received a tip. Someone had finally tracked down the neighbor who left the handwritten note. She explained that she had genuinely borrowed Robert's wheelbarrow a few days earlier and hadn't seen him since. Wanting to return it, she left the note on his door in an attempt to reach him. With her explanation checking out, detectives ruled her out as a suspect and turned their attention back to the murder. Soon after, they received Robert's autopsy report, and its findings were brutal. He had died from 28 sharp force injuries, a combination of deep slashes and stab wounds. One strike had severed a major artery, causing rapid blood loss. Shockingly, the broken tip of a knife was still lodged in his spine, suggesting the attack was carried out with extreme force. There were also clear signs of post-mortem burning. To the investigators, this wasn't a random act of violence. It was personal. The overkill and attempt to destroy evidence pointed to a killer driven by rage, someone who likely knew Robert well. Then, just as things began to take shape, detectives learned that someone had recently been arrested for a similar home invasion in the area. Without wasting time, they brought the individual in for questioning, hoping they might finally be closing in on Robert's killer.
For murder of a university professor. Okay? Old retired guy, chemistry guy. Okay? Anything that you can think of?
This is all new to me, sir, so no, it's not really.
I know a lot of things about this case. I got a lot of evidence on this case, and it's better to be a witness than a co-conspirator or, okay?
Yes, sir.
So I just want to make that absolutely clear.
I don't know what's going on. You can open that phone, do what you want to do.
I appreciate that. That's all going to go a long way.
Okay, that's like I said, I'm just came home to tell you. I'm not trying to get.
You don't want to go back.
Yeah, nothing.
The man gave solid details proving he wasn't involved. But just as detectives were ready to move on, he mentioned something unexpected. He'd seen someone on the street recently, trying to sell a Mac computer. What he didn't know was that a Mac was among the items missing from Robert's home. Suddenly, the case took a sharp turn, and detectives had a new lead that could change everything.
He wanted to buy a phone for me, yeah. And then he tried to offer me a Mac computer. Like, this was like around that time, he asked to send me a Mac. I'm like, no, I don't want no computer. I don't know.
You guys trying to sell you one?
Yeah, trying to say, like, you know, but you interested in buying a Mac computer? I'm like, nah, bro, I don't straight. I don't know what you involved in, but I'm straight on the Mac computer.
Did he say anything about where he got it?
No, yeah, that's where I asked him, like, where did you get it from?
He tried to sell you anything else besides the Mac computer?
That was it. Like I said, he walked around with a big ass book bag on board. So I don't know what that bag was.
They ever discussed with you burning anything?
No, sir.
Throwing anything away?
No, sir.
He ever mentioned to you doing home invasion?
No, sir.
Ever seen him with a knife?
No, sir.
Unfortunately, after the interrogation, detectives couldn't link the man to the murder and ruled him out as a suspect. Still, they believed the individual he'd mentioned, the one trying to sell the Mac, might have been involved in the earlier robbery. It made sense. He could have been trying to get rid of stolen property before getting caught. The problem? No one knew who he was. The only hope of identifying him was if a nearby surveillance camera had captured his face. But before detectives could pursue that angle, a new lead emerged. In a follow-up conversation, David mentioned that back in May 2018, while Robert was at Wendy's, he had briefly gone to the restroom, and when he returned, his Apple laptop was gone. The staff, familiar with Robert from his regular visits, tried to help him search, but it was never recovered. Detectives now suspected that someone working at Wendy's might have taken it. After all, only the staff knew Robert's usual seat, one conveniently outside the view of security cameras. When they ran background checks on the employees working that day, one name quickly stood out.
Of course, we went to Wendy's and we pulled video of Sharp at the Wendy's on the last day we knew he was there. And he's easy enough to recognize because he's a tall, slender, elderly gentleman. And we'd watch the video of him interacting and nothing seems suspicious. Staff looks normal with him. We go through the employee list and we just do a basic background on each employee. We found that there was an individual, Ice of Hamilton, who was on parole at the time. Well, we found that he was on parole for a home invasion case. So he goes to the top of the heap. He goes a primary suspect at that point.
To their surprise, The suspect turned out to be 29-year-old Isom Hamilton, a Wendy's employee with a serious criminal history. He had been out on parole since November 2017 after serving 4 years for assaulting a police officer, possessing a dangerous weapon, and committing arson. Despite his background, no one at the restaurant had ever suspected him of stealing Robert's laptop. But with 6 felony convictions and 16 misdemeanors on his record, Hamilton quickly became a central figure in the investigation. Detectives began digging into his movements on the day of the murder, and that's when surveillance footage from a Speedway gas station at the intersection of Carpenter Road and Packard Street revealed a crucial lead.
It was closer to 2 o'clock in the morning, and we see him come in with 2 backpacks. It appears to be stains on his clothing, specifically his pants. And he opens the backpack at one point to reach into it, and you can see Roku devices, which were missing from the homicide scene. You can see them actually sitting on top of that backpack.
In the gas station footage, detectives noticed dark brown stains on Hamilton's pants, stains they believed were blood, possibly hastily wiped off after Robert's murder. With the evidence building, they felt confident they were closing in on the killer. But when they tried to locate Hamilton, he had vanished. Desperate for a lead, they turned to his grandmother, with whom he'd been living at the time. During questioning, she shared details that helped investigators connect the final dots and pointed them straight toward the man they believed had murdered Robert Sharp.
Grandson Isom has been staying with you since about when you told me that? About the end of February? Okay. Ted, so you started seeing some things that weren't hidden. Tell me about that again. What was going on?
When he was still working, some of the items I thought, I said, well, maybe he might have bought them in the store, but I wasn't sure. And I know those apples are quite expensive, and I know he wasn't making enough money to buy apples.
So you saw him with an Apple computer? Yeah. He's probably not making enough money.
Oh, no. Not at that, no.
And so you ask him about it, and he tells you what?
Well, he told me, a guy had offered to sell it for him. He wanted to sell it for him.
So that didn't make sense either, really, then, right? Okay. What other kind of things were you seeing that caught your attention? A telephone? What kind of? Do you have any idea what kind of telephone? Okay. It was an Apple phone?
Yeah.
Were you suspicious of the Apple phone too, though, or? And what did he tell you about the one he's trying to give you?
Hey, Grandma, I bought all of it. I bought this for my money. I bought them, and I'm just keeping up for to sell them. I mean, I know, you know.
So he bought them, but he told you he was going to sell them. But that doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't. So what I did, I don't know what you're doing. You take this back, you get paid for it, take it back, and get all that other stuff out of my house. And I said, any stolen goods, I don't want any stuff in my house.
Yeah. And how about items like for the TV? We talked about this Roku stuff.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
And it was 3 boxes.
So you saw 3 Roku boxes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Stole for me once. You got caught working in somebody's house.
You stole from YouTube?
Yes.
Hamilton's grandmother revealed that his income didn't match his recent purchases, including an Apple computer and phone, both of which seemed far beyond his means. She had no idea where he'd gotten them, but detectives were now convinced they were stolen from Robert. With that suspicion confirmed, they shifted the conversation to the night of the murder, hoping she might unknowingly provide the detail that would seal the case.
As far as the regular phones go, was there a time that you saw him come home and he had some stain or some kind of stuff on his pants that caught your attention?
Yeah, that one time he came home with some blue cheese. Well, it was that late at night and he came in and it was like this kind of rough stuff and I'm like, what happened to you? Well, I had to go help with somebody. I didn't get hurt. I said, where did the blood come from? It came to the upper part. You know, the other day, I saw the price in his bag. Why your bag is big? But it did look like he was like that the blue jeans were wearing, they were bloody.
You were bloody? Yeah. Where did you see the blood on the blue jeans? Done there, okay. Mostly on from the knee down, would you say? Like below the knee?
Yeah. I'd say that might have been it.
Okay. Blood on the blue jeans was maybe a couple weeks ago.
I can't say for sure, but it wasn't visibly.
You can't say exactly, but you think maybe 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
So he came in, you said it was late at night. What time, what do you call late at night? Or do you have any recollection of what time it was?
It's like about 1 or when he was working 1 or 2 o'clock. And sometime when he wasn't working, he would try to come in early, like,
So what time on that day do you think he was? Any idea?
That was, I think, last night. I'm not sure, but I don't think it might be.
Around past 12 o'clock, maybe? We're talking 12 o'clock midnight. Right?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there, past midnight.
Yeah.
She recalled seeing Hamilton around midnight on the night of the murder, and what stood out was that his pants were stained with blood below the knees, exactly as seen in the earlier CCTV footage. That chilling detail was enough to push the investigation forward. Detectives swiftly obtained a search warrant for his grandmother's apartment in Ypsilanti, and inside they finally uncovered the crucial evidence they had been desperately searching for.
In the Speedway video, Lyson is wearing a specific t-shirt, a specific pair of pants. We did the search warrant at his grandma's house, and we were able to find a pair of pants that had stains on it. He had a backpack with him. He had 2 stolen computers with him. We just matched the serial numbers up. Both of them were Robert Sharp's.
Inside the apartment, detectives found blood-stained jeans and several of Robert's missing belongings. Undeniable evidence linking Hamilton to the crime. With enough to charge him, he was arrested on June 27, 2018, and brought to the station for interrogation. But once inside the room, his behavior took an odd turn. His responses were evasive, disjointed, and at times disturbingly calm.
So, we tracked down a couple people and talked to a couple people, and we executed a search warrant over at your grandma's place, and we got some stuff. So we need kind of to talk to you about that stuff if you want to know what's going on. I can't hear you, man. What? I'm sorry, what? One more time. You were kind of mumbling there. I thought I heard what you said, but if you want to be real clear about it.
And what's the lawyer?
Okay. You don't want to talk to me now? You want to talk to the lawyer? That's fine. And we got some stuff.
Got more. We can't talk to you now unless you want to talk to us first.
So, come on out. Put your bag in your cell.
During the interrogation, Hamilton sat with his head down, refusing to answer any questions without a lawyer, silent, as if calculating his next move. Detectives, meanwhile, continued piecing together the evidence to reconstruct the tragic sequence of events. Robert, a familiar face at Wendy's, was well known to Hamilton. Over time, through casual conversations, Hamilton learned that Robert was financially well off. That knowledge turned into motive. Investigators believed Hamilton began tracking Robert's daily routine, even visiting his home on occasion, quietly taking note of valuable possessions. After the death of Robert's wife, detectives believed he became an easier target. Hamilton allegedly broke into the house twice, once in early June and again on June 10th, the day of the murder. Expecting Robert to be away, he was startled to find him home. Before Robert could react, Hamilton grabbed a knife from the kitchen's butcher block and attacked, stabbing him multiple times. He then dragged the body to basement and tried to burn it, a failed attempt to destroy evidence. But all of this remained theory. Despite mounting suspicion, detectives knew Hamilton would never confess, and the evidence so far only tied him to burglary, not murder. They pinned their hopes on forensics, the DNA at the scene and the blood-stained jeans. Then came a twist. None of the DNA or fingerprints from the crime scene matched Hamilton. Even the stains on his jeans tested negative for Robert's blood. With no forensic link to the murder, detectives turned to circumstantial evidence. A friend of Hamilton's stepped forward, saying she'd seen him walking toward Ann Arbor on the evening of June 10th. After a brief chat, they went separate ways, but days later, Hamilton offered her a Roku streaming device, which she declined. Detectives found that especially strange, considering Robert's credit card had been discovered near his own body. This led them to a new lead, checking the financial records for any unusual transactions made after Robert's death.
Lo and behold, there's a couple failed transactions to a Square account. at about 12:30 the night of the murder. Those went to the crime lab and they came back as an attempted transaction to Isom. We also found out through cell phone records that he was pinging off the tower next to Robert Sharp's residence, stationary for 2 hours.
Detectives uncovered a crucial digital trail when they learned that Hamilton owned 2 cell phones and had used one to create a Square account, attempting to transfer money from Robert's credit card to his own account on the other phone shortly after the murder. The transaction failed because he mistakenly tried to use a credit card instead of a debit card. Further analysis by FBI agents revealed that Hamilton had been within 80 meters of Robert's home at the time of the murder and later traveled to his grandmother's house in Ypsilanti. Investigators also found that Robert had recently purchased a new laptop, which he had used to video chat with his son on the night of his death. That same laptop, missing from the crime scene, was later spotted in surveillance footage showing Hamilton at the Apple Store in Briarwood Mall the next morning, attempting to wipe its hard drive. With mounting circumstantial evidence including stolen property, failed financial fraud, and location tracking, Hamilton was charged with first-degree murder, arson, home invasion, and mutilation of a dead body, with greed now standing out as the unmistakable motive.
Isom Hamilton broke into the home on June 6th and then broke back in hopes to get additional items of value when the homicide happened. Isom Hamilton showed no remorse and no emotion. To me, it was very sad.
Investigators dug deeper into Hamilton's twisted psychology to understand what could drive someone to take an innocent life over something as petty as theft, and they soon uncovered a disturbing pattern. In 2012, Hamilton had been convicted of a similar home invasion involving a university professor in Ypsilanti. During that incident, when the professor caught him leaving with stolen electronics, Hamilton threatened to shoot him if he didn't get out of the way. The professor backed off and narrowly avoided being killed, and Hamilton was later found hiding under a bush nearby. Analyzing that earlier case, detectives realized Hamilton had a method. He would wear gloves, break in while residents were away, steal valuable electronics, and leave quickly with the items stuffed in a bag, gloves like the ones found on him during his 2012 arrest. This pattern also explained the lack of fingerprints or DNA at Robert's house, further reinforcing the theory. Despite having no history of mental illness or substance abuse, Hamilton's repeated behavior pointed to one clear motive: greed. With the overwhelming circumstantial and digital evidence stacked against him, Hamilton had no plausible way to escape justice, yet he continued to protest his arrest and insisted on his innocence.
So the detectives already told me they went through the scene, none of my prints, none of my DNA was there, and they already took my DNA.
I'm not in a position to argue the case.
So why am I being incarcerated falsely?
During the 4-day trial, Hamilton's defense attorneys argued that the prosecution lacked sufficient physical evidence to directly tie him to the murder, emphasizing the absence of his DNA or fingerprints at the crime scene as a critical weakness in the case. Despite the damning circumstantial and digital evidence presented, Hamilton remained defiant throughout the proceedings, showing no remorse and firmly denying any involvement in Robert's death.
To the family, I didn't kill nobody. All this is circumstantial. Me being in possession of electronics that I bought off somebody else is just that. All elements were not met at all. I've been prosecuted and convicted solely on the premise of my past, subjective opinions, and mere speculation. This case was normally and prematurely bound over without any definitive evidence, lab results, or essential elements being met or presented. I was never placed at the crime scene. There was never any material witness stating I was in the area neighborhood, which I would have been easily recognized and stood out due to the fact that the area is predominantly white people or white older people. There's no black in that area of Ann Arbor. I would easily been stood out, especially walking down the street as I went over the maps that they've prepared. It's not no easy way to get to his house. It's a long way. Somebody would have seen me. Night, day, either way. There are multiple cameras at the golf course on Eisenhower, along with cameras in the traffic lights and on people's houses, as was in the reports when the neighborhood was canvassed by William Stanford and Detective Daniel Iverson, along with other people. The circumstantial evidence of me being in possession of stolen property after the fact is just that, possession without any concrete evidence that placed me at the crime scene, since I was biasedly found guilty on circumstantial evidence alone. All the elements were not met, and the prosecutor, John Paul Vella, wildly threw opinions and speculation around his facts, and he blatantly lied about the physical evidence, such as the allegedly bloody clothes that were recovered a few days after I was arrested But at trial, the prosecutor, John Paul Vela, stated that the clothes were never recovered after statements were given to the news stations that bloody clothing was recovered before they even sent it to the MSP lab. Once they were sent to the lab, everything came back negative for blood, and the results for all biological and physical evidence was never presented at trial. This was all done with malicious intent because everyone's mindset is that if they stated on the news, it's true. Even after they came back and found the results that no blood or nothing was ever found on any clothing taken from my residence, they didn't put that on the news. They didn't correct that or nothing. But yet, that was in the public's or the community's eye. That's why I went with the bench trial. Because the jury doesn't have to go by law. They can go by opinion, bias, or compassion. But you were supposed to make sure that justice was served. All elements were met. No, all elements were not met. I was never placed at the crime scene.
The forensic expert who had performed Robert's autopsy also testified in court.
There's some parts of them that have a small rim of red in terms of the body maybe responding a little bit to it. And so I would, in my opinion, he died the fire would have been started almost very quickly after death or in the process of dying.
Isom Hamilton was convicted after a total of 30 witnesses testified, and more than 300 pieces of evidence were presented during the trial. On June 28, 2019, Washtenaw County Trial Judge Darlene O'Brien, deeming the circumstantial evidence overwhelming and compelling, found Hamilton guilty of the murder of Robert Sharp.
Your selfish, violent, and senseless acts have brought anguish, fear, and suffering to many. Nothing can bring back the life that's been lost, but you have proven yourself to be the highest danger to society, and you cannot be trusted with freedom again.
Evaluating the sheer brutality of the crime and the calculated nature of the murder, the court sentenced Isom Hamilton to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never walk free again.
It was a huge relief for me, huge relief for the family. I felt like I could finally bring the family some closure.
Finally, justice was served for Robert's loved ones, but the tragic loss remained difficult for them to accept.
Besides just the extreme, profound sadness, I had, just persistent nightmares about the murder, or about being able to stop the murder, or about having somebody in our house about to take my family. That actually was quite difficult.
It was such a hard time. That whole period was like, it was like living a nightmare, a dream, and floating on a cloud at the same time. You just don't know what you're doing or who you are. It was a tough situation. It's also tough because our kids went, and it's tough to explain to them how something like this could happen.
I'll never know if he was, calling out for me in his last moments. That's entirely unknowable, whether he was thinking about me in his last moments, or whether if I'd been there, could I have helped him? I should have been there to protect him. My father was a funny, empathetic man who you had to get to know. And then once you knew him, all of those wonderful traits came out. He loved people. He loved art. He loved culture. He was just a joy to be around.
Following the tragic incident, Wendy's also paid tribute to Robert and his wife Maria.
They had been going to this Wendy's for at least 16 years. The employees of Wendy's, along with the Wendy's franchise, have put up plaques in honor of my mother-in-law and father-in-law in both the restaurant and in the outdoor bench where they would eat. If there's anything, it's just you wish you could just have a little bit more time.
Before we conclude, we extend our heartfelt condolences to Robert Sharp and his loved ones. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe Isom Hamilton was solely involved in the robbery, or do you think the evidence supports his guilt in the murder as well? Share your opinions in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. I hope you enjoyed this video. If yes, please like and subscribe to our channel. It will help us a lot and motivate us to continue making videos like this.